VR Dodgeball Trainer is exactly what it sounds like. It's a virtual dodgeball simulator that is meant for dodgeball players to practice their dodging. There's no throwing, sadly, and I'll talk about that in this video. But if you want to train like a pro, be my guest and play my game. And yeah, that's all you do. Dodge balls and wrenches. So in college, I was on my school's dodgeball team, and I loved it. I took it so seriously. I even got most improved player, and we all kind of took it seriously because we even practiced more than every other team. Our coach was the coach of Canada's national dodgeball team. But when the pandemic hit, I wanted to keep up my practice, so I thought I'd make this little dodgeball demo thing, and it was kind of fun, but it was really rough. But just like any young developer, I got way too ambitious and started making an open world survival game with like way too many features. And it wasn't until 2021 when my controller broke and it forced me to work on something else. So that would be a good idea to put hand tracking in my dodgeball game, and that's exactly what I did. I started posting about it on Reddit, and this actually got picked up by Clique Games, so they helped me publish this game out, and they're a publishing company that specializes in like VR arcades, and it's kind of perfect for that. But they've kind of expanded ever since, and they've just been super helpful with getting me connected and getting my game out there. So this is my first game ever published, and I just wanted to keep it really simple. I learned my lesson from the last game I was working on. This just kind of allowed me to get something out there to show off and just polish it up, make sure there's no bugs in it. The other good thing about keeping it simple is that we can really appeal to VR arcades. Like a lot of the people that go to these arcades have like never played VR before, so it's just really simple. You just hit play and then you're using your body to dodge, and that's it. But at the same time, you're still practicing like a physical skill, and you're moving around and engaging your body. So it's a great for new people, and it's great to like warm up and get ready for your VR session. Now that this game was being made for more than just dodgeball players, I had to add some simple game modes, not training drills, but I kept it simple still. So classic mode is just an endless wave-based game mode where you test to see how long you can survive. Arcade is the same, but a little crazier with guns and swords and curveballs and more. Then we have both those modes in 360, which is just ridiculously hard. And it sort of gives me this feeling of a game we used to play in practice where it was just no boundaries, every man for themselves. You're just kind of like running around and jumping manically because like you have the feeling someone's throwing at you, you just don't know from where. And then there's training mode. This is where you go just to see where you're at. You get to pick the hardest difficulty if you want and see if you can handle it. I gotta say this one's my favorite. Even though we put arcade front and center, and we want people to play that one because it gets the most love, but yeah, this one's my favorite because you just get to go to the hardest difficulty straight away. This is where you get to pick like how many opponents you're up against, the delay between the throws, how many people are throwing at a time, speed of the balls, the distance, and you can even get wrenches thrown at you all the time if that's what you please. When I first started working on this game, I thought it'd be really cool to have videos as the opponents. It's not in this clip, I'll show it next, but the problem with having just red cylinders is that you can't tell when they're going to throw at you. And I thought videos would be cool because you're actually reading another human, and they can pump fake and then actually throw. But I ran into a lot of problems here, like with the timing and the looping and just accounting for lag on the quest as well. The ball never was spawned and got launched at the same time that the video did, and you had to be pretty on point with that. I tried to come up with a few solutions, like putting all the videos into one, because I started with 6 individual videos, which created a lot of lag, and then one video had a bit of lag, but then you didn't get the same flexibility with just one whole video. So I ended up, just going with volumetric people and then stylized the game around that. My earliest prototype also had an aiming system, but it wasn't perfect. Like if you moved too far outside of the original play zone, like the aiming system just wouldn't line up anymore, or if you just moved in one direction, there was no prediction to it. So I came up with like a really solid system that like accounts for any sort of tactic you might try to pull, like if you go right up to the line or like way all the way back, or just they will hit you from anywhere. Like even if you get super low or stay still or try to juke it, like they're gonna hit you. And I can sort of show how that works a little bit. So you see these dots moving around, and like it's just kind of getting the velocity of like where you're moving, and then sometimes it'll even go the opposite direction in case you try to switch it up, and then it's like getting a random height as well, but it still kind of goes for the head still. But yeah, that's the way it works. Something players will probably never realize that this game has is a jumping mechanic. It's kind of never useful, and the system's flawed, and I'll explain why. The way it works is that when you set your height and then you go above that set height, the collider will lift off the ground for a short amount of time, and then the system waits for you to go below that set height, and then you can jump again. But you can use this like practically, like you can set your height like just kind of at where your squatting and dodging stance is, and then when you jump you have to make sure you go above that set height. But then again, you can also like abuse it by like setting it low and then doing like a squat just to jump. But the system's still flawed because you can jump and still remain below your set height. Like it can stay at the same height, you could even jump downwards, like a dive for example, which is a huge part of Dodgeball. There's just no way to translate that over to VR unless there's like foot trackers. Another thing I should talk about here is building your games for VR arcades. It's not that crazy to implement, it's not that complicated, the documentation's pretty simple, the help is out there, and yeah, like most of the time you just had to drag and drop something into the scene and then build it out and then just deactivate it for all the other builds. Or like another one, you just had to put something into the build file. Yeah, it wasn't that crazy. And sometimes too, like Synthesis, for example, has leaderboards, so you can add like an arcade leaderboard system to your game. Yeah, and also the help is out there too, like I said. Like I had Synthesis trying the game out, making it sure it worked on their end and it was ready to go up in the store. So super helpful and not that complicated, and worth the time to implement. I feel like I need to talk about this because everybody wants to see throwing in a dodgeball game, okay? And there's dodgeball games out there that you can try for yourself, but I just wanted to stick to the original idea for this game, which was to be a serious dodgeball trainer. And the only things that you can accurately simulate are dodging and blocking. And even dodging isn't completely accurate because the collider doesn't magically link to your body. In this game, the collider is directly below the player's head, but it's enough to get you to move exactly how you would in a real game. If you've ever played a game in VR and that required you to throw something, you know exactly what I mean when I say it doesn't translate properly. Humans are naturally and instinctually amazing at throwing. Trying to simulate such a complex action through one button and some velocity calculations will just never be enough. So in order for this app to still be useful for serious dodgeball players, I decided early on that throwing would not be in this game. I also made the same decision for catching because it just takes away from the whole dodging aspect of this game. As soon as you add catching, everybody just goes for catches. The thing is, almost everyone that plays this game and buys this game would still want to see throwing in this game, and I don't disagree with them. I actually was really curious and tried to make my own prototype with throwing, but I just felt like it took away from the training aspect, so I started calling this prototype VR Dodgeball Hero, because like as soon as you start practicing with the wrong form, it becomes less of a trainer and more just like a game. So I developed a system with a few different throwing options you could choose between, and the goal was just to be as quick and as accurate as possible. I added a reticle because you should be able to pick exactly where you want to throw. But I also took the motion of the throw into account, so if your swing was a little bit to the left, then the ball would go a little bit to the left of the reticle. And if your throw was completely off, it would just ignore the reticle altogether and just go back to default throwing mechanics. And to aim, you would stick out your hand and hold the trigger. The trigger felt intuitive because that's how you aim in shooter games on a controller. And it would basically draw a line between your head and then your hand, and then point out into that direction, and that's where your reticle would land. I was actually really happy with this system. It felt like I could aim in a fraction of a second. It felt like I was using proper dodgeball form and the game worked as expected. But I had a bunch of people try this out, and no one could aim as fast as I could. Maybe it would just take them time to warm up, but even if that, most people just wanted to throw without the aiming part. And I totally get it, because dodgeball is like a super fast sport. You don't really have time to aim, and like the default throwing in my game is like a solution that's out there and is liked and is commonly used. But like even with that in place, people didn't really get the ball to go where they wanted it to, and therefore the feedback just wasn't that great, because the game relies so heavily on you being able to hit your targets. Just yeah, it's exactly what I thought was going to happen. So just sticking with the original concept of the game was the right thing to do.
It's crazy because I made a game that actually makes me sweat.